Hey, I'm glad you clicked on this video because we're going to talk about self-care. And no, I'm not going to tell you to just drink more water. If you don't know you're supposed to drink water, then you probably have a whole other set of issues that I cannot help with. We're going to talk about self-care as an act of resistance under capitalism. Okay, what's up? I'm Damon, and we've been in this series about spiritual health for leftists. It's very important, and it's about time we finally talk about self-care. Now, we all know depression and anxiety are more rampant than ever, especially among young people, and so many of the reasons usually come down to capitalism. And as for those you know that deny this, usually if you start asking them why they feel the way they do, you can usually find a way it connects back to capitalism. But they've bought into this individualistic narrative that says, no, it's no one else's fault, it's nothing else's fault, it's my fault alone, every problem I have is only my fault, and only I alone can change my problems. And for some issues, that is the case, and you need to take care of it, but I've also seen that narrative plenty of times lead to repression, which leads to even more depression and anxiety. And several corporations have caught on to this problem and offered the solution: just participate more in this system. Self-care and self-improvement means treat yourself, splurge, you deserve it.
What do we treat ourselves to?
Clothes.
Treat yourself.
Fragrances.
Treat yourself.
Massages.
Treat yourself.
Mimosas.
Treat yourself.
Fine leather goods.
Treat yourself.
I hesitated even making this video about self-care because that word has become so tainted, and I'm sure that plenty of you out there who, like me, when they hear that word just think of bath bombs, face masks, and comfort food, because we've seen so many Instagram posts showing that stuff off with the hashtag self-care.
Self-care? First of all, if you have to tell me and announce your bubble bath, you're probably an asshole.
In 2015, Pew Research Center reported that millennials spend twice as much as boomers on self-care essentials, such as workout plans, diet regimens, life coaching, therapy, and apps to improve our personal well-being. And this is also kind of interesting because we live in a culture that says millennials are constantly killing industry after industry after industry. So we should pay attention to the fact that millions of young people are spending their limited funds on these self-care products, and it shows how deeply dissatisfied we are in this capitalist society. In an article called Self-Care Won't Save Us by Aisling McCrea, she said, "Why are these feelings familiar to so many of us, yet we feel so alone? We are atomized, individualized, struggling under the same system, but struggling inwardly and separately. Self-care slots in neatly with capitalism, treating mental ill health as an individual problem divorced from the material and political context, to be solved by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and maybe spending a little on the way. We are invited to draw inwards, shut our curtains, pull ourselves into movies and food and warm water and blankets as a means of escaping our problems without solving them. We are encouraged to reach out to others if we feel able to, but our relationships to others in the language of self-care appears to be as mutual conduits for pressure relief. Reaching out always seems to mean drawing someone into the blanket with you rather than throwing the blanket off." But self-care is older than capitalism, so it shouldn't look how the mainstream culture makes it look. There's that classic Audre Lorde quote that's brought up in a lot of these conversations that says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And I fully agree with that. But what does that kind of self-care look like? The mainstream narrative says the solution to our anxiety in this culture of endless production and endless consumption is to just take a break from some of the endless production every once in a while and lean in more on the part of endless consumption and take a break and treat yourself a bit so that you can continue to endless production more efficiently. I say self-care done right is the resistance to that cycle of endless production and endless consumption by taking time to remove ourselves from it, to take care of ourselves through methods independent from endless consumption, in order to remind ourselves that we are humans and we do not need this cycle. Remind ourselves that you are a human being, not a human doing, right? There's a way more ancient word for this, by the way, and it comes from Judaism, also adopted by Christianity and other faiths, and that word is Sabbath, which means to rest and to cease. Now, keeping the Sabbath is one of the 10 Commandments, classic, but it's also something that the prophets of the Hebrew Bible are constantly reminding people to keep. There is an incredible amount of significance put on keeping the Sabbath. In Exodus 20, verse 6, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy." By the way, holy means set apart. Keep this day set apart. "For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, and none among you should do any work." Now consider the context of this verse in this story. The Israelites had just escaped slavery in Egypt after 400 years of slavery, and they're brought to Mount Sinai, where Moses goes up the mountain and comes back down and gives them these instructions about a new way to live life as free people. To live in a way that helps them learn how to be free people and to maintain their freedom and to maintain justice so that they never become like Egypt and oppress others. They end up disobeying that by the time of King Solomon, but that's another story. Let's talk specifically about this commandment to cease work on the seventh day of the week and rest. Now think about it. These people were slaves their entire lives. They worked every single day of the week, every week, under extremely harsh conditions. Therefore, their whole identity and worth was rooted in how many bricks they could produce for their masters. And then in this new society outside of slavery, there is still labor to be done, but not under harsh conditions, and we're going to take a day out of the week to rest, stop working, and to remind ourselves where our value actually comes from. It does not come from work, it does not come from how much you can produce, it does not come from your position in society, whether high or low. It comes from being free under God. It reminds them they are not in Egypt anymore, they are not an object to be exploited. They are free and they are worthy of love and acceptance just as they are, just as you are. It is not a day of rest, just a quick break so you can get back out there and be more efficient. It's actually the reverse. The day of rest is the culmination of all the work throughout the week. We work all week leading up to this ultimate culmination and celebration of Sabbath to remind ourselves of who we truly are. This is what the root of our modern self-care should look like. We take time to withdraw from the cycle of endless production and endless consumption and take care of ourselves through means independent from consumption, such as using less technology, being outside, resting, finding any way to consume less, not indulge and consume more. This is also why several religions to this day participate in fasting. This is what fasting actually really is about. Learning to take care of ourselves through methods independent from the endless cycle of consumption turns us into a threat to the survival of this system, because I believe this is also one of the ways that we can raise class consciousness. Part of living a life with the label of a particular leftist, anti-capitalist ideology attached to yourself, like Marxist, communist, socialist, anarchist, syndicalist, whatever, should be also living a life independent from an addiction to consumption, because of our deeply held values. Therefore, spreading this narrative of self-care should raise class consciousness and spread the awareness that we don't need to live the way we are living. There are alternative ways to live, alternative ways of running society and economic systems. So let's fight for a better world that would allow all of us the rest we need, the care we need, and the health we need. Because we are in a new kind of Egypt now, where we are slaves to a capitalist system that doesn't allow so many of us to rest because of how much we have to work in order to survive. Anyone who has faith in any sort of religion that involves the story of God rescuing slaves from Egypt should also be against the current economic system and be listening to the cry of the oppressed and fighting for a better world. No amount of self-care will save us under capitalism, but those of us who are able to practice self-care should do it for the purpose of breaking free from capitalist realism, reminding yourself that you are valuable and worthy of love and acceptance just as you are, and that value does not come from your participation in this cycle of endless production and endless consumption. And ultimately, we should continue to fight for a world where we can all be free from that cycle. Thank you for watching this video. Check out some of the other videos in this series about spiritual health for leftists, and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, if you want to hear me talk about the stuff I talk about on YouTube in a more free-form, interactive way, check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon. Right now we're streaming every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so check me out on there. And also, if you want to support me on patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Also, before we end, big shout out to my patrons already there. Karen in Colorado, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, James Finlay, New Transcendentalists, Kristen Mouse, Rob Hutton, Jack, Jacob McCarthy, Theory Plebe, Mike Lodato, and Frank Morales. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.